Your prospects don't want to be handled. And in fact, handling objections at the end of the call is probably the worst way to handle an objection. It's already too late. In today's episode, we're going to dive into why that's the case, what we can do about it, and what has changed from our prospects from a philosophical perspective and also from a behavioral perspective, of course, and what exactly we can do about it. Now, if we're handling objections at the end of the call, my personal philosophy is something has gone wrong earlier. It is the least persuasive way to deal with something is to combat it head on after the prospect has already made up their mind. And it probably feels, you've probably experienced this, it feels gross. Not probably, it feels gross. I don't want to be handled. You don't want to be handled. The prospects don't want to be handled. And so this is one of these things that is perpetuated in our industry that kind of drives me crazy, where it's been popularized to have these weird objection battles at the end of the call. Whereas on the other side of this, if we actually figure out how to prevent objections or install empowering thoughts through storytelling at the start or during discovery, we don't have to spend hours battling someone and sharing it on a Facebook group for everyone else to see how alpha I am that I convinced this person to buy something. It's just kind of gross. But you can actually be really effective, make tons of sales that end with prospects saying thanks. Like this actually feels like a really good decision. All my questions have been answered. Yeah, let's go for it. Which ultimately it lowers your potential refund rates. It lowers your disputes. You get better customers because they end up, and this is a core philosophy that we talk about, which is the difference between followers and leaders, which we'll dive into today, is you have empowered prospects. Prospects that have made a decision of their own accord, that are well aware of the risks, that are taking personal responsibility for their decision. It's why I'm not a big believer in guarantees and coaching offers, because as this relates to objections, if we promise a guarantee where it's like, I'll work with you for free until you do, or you don't pay, the person who is making that decision is not making that decision because they're informed of all the risk and they understand, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Can I handle it? What's the medium case scenario? What's the best case scenario? They're making that decision because your guarantee is promising that I don't have to do any work, or you're just going to make it happen for me. So their trust is not in themselves, it's externalized into the guarantee. And so then when it comes to doing the work, they're not trusting themselves to do the work because that's not the context that we set up when we onboarded them. They're trusting in the guarantee. And so they don't take the action, so they don't get the result. And then we wonder why there's such a poor completion rate or success rate within our industry, within the coaching industry or the information space. Because people are not informed buyers. They're buying because the guarantee said that they would be successful, not because they understand that they could fail, but they're willing to risk that failure, that river of uncertainty, and just continue anyway. So guarantees are I wouldn't do it. Honestly, I think if you're selling anything that is personal service based, that involves humans doing work, I think a guarantee is a disservice, which is why you won't often see it. I mean, obviously on a small, low ticket product like the playbook, like it's $12, yeah, sure, whatever. Right? It's a risk aversion, a risk mitigation strategy. But in offers like programs, I don't think you should guarantee. I think you actually set clients up for failure because they buy because of the guarantee, not because they're informed. And this ties back into our prospects don't want to be handled. If we handle our prospects, we are convincing them to do the thing. They're not doing it of their own accord, of their own personal empowerment. They're doing it because we convince them to do it, and then we use the guarantee to double down and get them to make that decision. So their locus of responsibility is not put within them, it's put in you because you convinced them, and also in the guarantee because the guarantee convinced them. So then when it comes to doing the work, which we can't do for them, they have to do for themselves, that locus of responsibility is still external to them. So they're not going to do the work. And this creates this vicious cycle where they don't get the result, they don't do the work, they blame us, they seek a refund, or they just become one of the many clients that don't succeed within our programs. And this is why I believe that the Socratic process of learning, which is one of like asking questions or understanding how to think, is better than a step-by-step do this. And a lot of my personal coaching comes down to that Socratic method, where it's asking questions for the prospect to find their own resources. And one of the best beliefs that we could borrow was that a prospect's not broken. They've just misplaced their resources. This is something that comes from the coaching world, where the presupposition, so the understanding when moving into a coaching relationship is our prospect isn't broken. They've just misplaced the resources. So if something's not working for the prospect, it's not on me to change it. It's on me to help ask questions to redirect that prospect to a time in which they have been resourceful or they've had the resources to face that particular challenge. Now, if we're heavily convincing people, handling them, and doing it for them, we're not actually guiding them to the resourcefulness to overcome that objection on their own, to build that trust in their own ability to make an empowered decision. And so this concept is called like building followers versus building leaders. And this guru style of I'm the guru, I will help you, put your trust in me. This creates people who have externalized locus of responsibility, which means that they don't take personal responsibility. They are putting that responsibility outside of themselves. So if that external circumstance changes or moves, so does their ability to be responsible. And this is typically what we see from a guru style, which is, like, I will make it happen. I am the magical person that can make the resources appear. And if you follow my system, you will be successful, blah, blah, blah. I would say, I've been doing this for 9 years, that there are no client has ever had the same path to their version of success. And even more than that, the versions of success or the definitions of success for clients have been wildly different. So for me in our business, we don't need $1 million business. At this stage of our life, we're having children. We're very content. We live in a very small town in New Zealand. All of our expenses are taken care of. We don't need a massive business, which also informs the structure of the business. So I do a lot more one-on-one coaching than the typical sales business, right? I like to have these long-term relationships with clients where we get to know each other over the course of 12 months, 18 months, where I can grow with them. And I think there's this magic in that intimacy. When you work with a client for a long period of time, you're actually able to, I believe a great coach can spot patterns and prevent problems from coming because you have that history. And there's that intimacy, I believe, is one of the critical factors of being successful, because no two clients' path to success is going to be the same. The recipe, right, could be, step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this, step 4, step 5, do these things in this order. I don't believe that works. If we have two different people, I give them the same recipe. One might get results really quickly and the other one might take their sweet time. So why is that? Well, it's because the internal conditioning of each person is slightly different. When I first started my business back in 2016, 2017, I had a couple of clients in sales that would absolutely crush. Like we're talking go from like $70,000 to $300,000 in revenue within 30 days. Then I had another set of clients that would struggle to make a couple of sales, but the content was exactly the same. It was the same recipe. So why, with one person following the same recipe, did the other person following the same recipe not get the same result? Because there's more to it. That's an oversimplification. So on one hand, we had this person who was heavily driven by significance, whose self-worth was determined by results. So therefore they worked their ass off to achieve the outcome because that's how they knew that they mattered and they belonged. We had this other person that was driven by connection and relationship. And so their primary driver was not to be successful, to be noticed. It was to have connections with people. So they tended to go off script and help people rather than close people. And so the internal world or the internal conditioning actually shaped that person's results far more than the recipe ever did. So if we come back to this followers versus leaders model, is this guru style of generating followers to fulfill their own sort of sense of significance and make these promises to create externalized locuses of control. It's not great for people that want to be successful because it's assuming that thousands of people can follow the exact same recipe and produce the exact same result, where in my experience, that very rarely happens. Now, given there are what I call certain emotional benchmarks that are common with prospects, where there's emotional benchmark 1 that most prospects need to hit, emotional benchmark 2, 3, and 4. But it's not a recipe. It's more like a development of a self-esteem or development of emotional intelligence that needs to happen for each prospect for them to empower themselves to the next level of the recipe to achieve that next level of outcome. And we talked about the other day where my client that did 27,000, one of the emotional benchmarks that he had to pass was this internal emotional conflict where the financial goal was in conflict with a meaning goal. Now, that's something that I know that every single high-performing client is going to have to face it one day. That's an emotional benchmark. But how they face that is slightly different. It'll be different for each person. And we can say that everyone will have that conflict at some point. Will it always be, in this case, music passion versus making money? No, it could be something else. It could be money versus family time. And I know that's been a personal one for me, has been whatever I do in my business, I want it to be shaped around having time for my family, not being too burnt out for my family. I also really value relationships. So that informs my business in the sense that I want relationship-focused clients, which is why we don't tend to have large group programs. I tend to work more one-on-one with people over a longer period of time because I value those relationships. So when we talk about followers versus leaders, the opposite of the guru model is the leadership model. And so the leadership model is where people buy because they have an internal locus of control. They trust themselves. They are making a decision for themselves. And they can only do that if we aren't convincing them, or we aren't pushing them, or we aren't telling them what to do. Instead, we inform them of the risks, and they make the decision whether the payoff for the promise of what we're offering is worth the risk of it not happening. So they become fully informed, and they take responsibility for that decision. And these people become leaders. Now, the benefit of leaders cannot be understated. Leaders are fantastic. Whenever you create a leader client, they're the ones that are 10 times more likely to refer business because they didn't associate the expertise to the program. They felt empowered. They felt like they could do it, and they value that higher than information. So they had an internal transformation. They believed that they got better, that they completely changed, which they did because they took personal responsibility because of how we set it up that way, because we didn't convince them. We got them through the Socratic method to actually take action, to move, to create, that they then tell other people. They said, this is different to everything else that I've done. This is not information. This is transformation. And these clients, these leaders prefer more, they achieve more, they're fantastic. So my business, up until a couple of years ago, we weren't doing a lot of marketing. We didn't have a lot of these fancy funnels. If you've seen our playbook funnel, we didn't have a lot of that going on because I had so many leader clients that were just feeding my business referrals. We have an incredible amount of referrals, which is very lucky. And it's also how I measure business success. Is if I'm getting referrals, it means clients are happy and they're getting results, which is awesome. And I think that's the number one metric of being successful is, are your clients referring? Not how much money you make, but how many referrals are you getting from clients that are really, really happy? Because that is the ultimate test, isn't it? That's what I believe anyway. So yeah, so if we bring this all back together, this is the difference between followers and leaders. This is why convincing versus inviting. The convincing doesn't work. The inviting is better. This is why handling our prospects and fighting our prospects with objections is no good. And why empowering our prospects to make their own decisions is even better. If you love today's episode and the slightly different take on sales training, let me know in the comments below. Give us a like and even a subscribe. I would appreciate it. Even a rating as well. That helps us a ton. And I'll see you in the next one.